Go. We have a
Wonderful.
quorum and we're ready.
And I will call this meeting to order and ask that Melissa call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the TPC, I'll call your name. Please indicate if you're present for the record and be sure to unmute before responding. Rock Arnett. Mayor Barney.
Present.
Thank you. David Barry. Councilmember Binsbacher.
Present.
Thank you. Jen Daniels. Present. Thank you. Doug DeClusen. Mayor Giles.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
I'm
Mayor
here.
Hart- Thank you, Mayor Hall. Mayor Hartkey.
Present.
Thank you. Charles Humantle. Cheryl Lombard.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Lord.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Price.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Sellers.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wires.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitehead. Here. Thank you. Mayor Woods. And our chairwoman is present. Is there anyone I didn't call? A quorum is present.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today. All attendees entered the meeting with mute on. Please remember to unmute your device before speaking and mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. MAG staff has asked me to let you know that we are very focused on transparency here, giving public access to committee meetings, materials, and discussion. In this platform, the public cannot view the chat comments. As a result, we are disabling the chat feature in all committee meetings moving forward. If you need technical assistance during a meeting, please contact the helpline at 602-452-5095 or contact MAG staff. We appreciate your understanding in helping to maintain transparent discussions for the benefit of the public. The next item is a call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. MAG staff, have we received any public comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We received no public comments for today's meeting.
Thank you. The next item is approval of the consent agenda. Items 3A and 3B are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the TPC have any questions or would like a presentation on any of these items? Could I have a motion to recommend approval of items 3A and 3B?
So moved,
Madam-
Mayor Hartkey.
Second from Ken Weiss.
We have a motion from Mayor Hartkey and a second from Mayor Weiss. Is there any discussion of the motion? Melissa, will you call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the TPC, I will call your name. Please indicate how you vote on the motion for the record. Be sure to unmute before responding. Rock Arnett. Mayor Barney.
Aye.
Thank you. David Barry. Councilmember Binsbacher.
Aye.
Thank you. Jen Daniels. Aye. Thank you. Mayor Giles.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hartkey.
Yes.
Thank you. Charles Humantle. Cheryl Lombard.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Lord.
No. Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Price.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne.
Aye.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
Aye.
Thank you. Supervisor Sellers.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Wires.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitehead. Aye. Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Madam Chair, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? The consent agenda carries unanimously.
Item 4 is an update of the development of a new regional transportation plan. MAG Transportation staff Audra Kester Thomas will provide a report.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of Transportation Policy Committee. Pleased to be with you today to present the latest in the activities associated with the development of our new regional transportation plan to inform an extension of Proposition 400. We're at a very important milestone, having completed the bulk of our technical analysis and work, taking over 9 months or so, and delivering 4 fiscally constrained potential scenarios for your consideration. Today's meeting will focus on those 4 scenarios, using as a decision support tool to help inform the development of a preferred scenario that probably falls somewhere in between. Our focus will include a high-level review of some of the material that were distributed as part of your agenda today. Included in it was the full scenario planning report, chock full of a lot of technical analysis and details, in addition to an assumptions memo that further outlines some of the financial assumptions that support each of these scenarios. We're anxious to get some of your feedback today as we move from this technical element of the planning process and now into the decision-making process. Next slide. Just want to orient you back to our performance-based plan development process. As guided by both state and federal statute, we go through and use data to help with some of these really important decisions. Next slide. As I noted, we are at the end of this heavy technical lift, moving from our technical analysis and now into the decision-making process. We're using these 4 fiscally constrained scenarios. We'll be looking for your guidance to develop a preferred alternative, which will also inform a future tax rate and term. Next slide. If you had a chance to review our scenario planning report, you saw at the beginning an emphasis on what happens if we don't continue this important regional sales tax for transportation. It is one of our major funding sources available to the region for transportation investment. And if it were not continued, we would be left just with the federal formula funds that come to this region and declining state revenue. What you'll see here is a projection of congestion in the afternoon in the year 2050, which is our planning horizon for this next regional transportation plan. And what you see illustrated here in the map is that we're left largely standing still because of our fast pace and growth, the continued development and expansion of this region. We'll see considerable congestion pressures on us. And our job is to mitigate those in part through this important continuation of the sales tax. Next slide. I want to orient you to this Venn diagram that helps to illustrate the 2 fundamental philosophies we used in developing our scenarios. We endeavored to create 2 different future views of the world, in part to help provide some options and recognize that we do have some tough choices ahead and that we can still address different kinds of mobility solutions, perhaps with those different solutions. You'll notice we have 2 overarching concepts: new capacity and system optimization. Our new capacity scenarios seek to improve or maintain the region's mobility through the addition of new capacity, including strategic investments in new roadway and rail-based transit. These are projects that carry big impact, but also often very big price tags, and that means we can do fewer of them. The system optimization scenarios prioritize investments in infrastructure and technology that improve or maintain the region's mobility with lower levels of investment in specifically new capacity. Focus in this kind of a scenario is in bus-based transit and a more diverse and resilient programmatic approach, allowing us to address different kinds of programs and ideas through this approach. Will ultimately fall somewhere in between these 2 concepts, picking projects and programs that fall somewhere in the middle or from each of these 4 scenarios, and may ultimately determine that a tax rate above 0.5 cent but below 1 cent is the right size for this region. We'll be looking to you to help inform those decisions. Next slide. Wanted to start with some very fundamental assumptions that are the principal guiding of each of these 4 scenarios. First and foremost, our funding portfolio is identified here as a flexible policy program. All revenues that are available to the region are included in these scenarios, and there's been deliberate consideration of how the sales tax or federal funds are used to ensure the public dollars are maximized. This is a lesson learned specifically out of Proposition 400. Examples include limiting the federalization of small projects for you or perhaps your staff. You know, that adds cost burden and often time, especially to small projects. It also offers us the opportunity to take advantage of new future federal funding programs and also the ability to respond to new direction coming with transportation reauthorization, which may change the composition of our federal funding and its use. Final funding allocations and program policies will ultimately be documented in the strategic investment strategy, which we will use as a policy management tool year over year, guiding the decisions of Transportation Policy Committee and Regional Council as we implement these programs and projects. And allocation decisions now and into the future, we believe are the responsibility of the Transportation Policy Committee and MAG Regional Council, consistent with federal regulation, and the reason why we're going to use our strategic investment strategy as the management tool. All project costs and revenue projections are represented in 2020 dollars. Once we identify the final investment strategy, we will apply inflation to these numbers. We also want to articulate that each of these 4 scenarios is representative of a guiding principle our policymakers have given, which is regional balance being maintained across the 3 subregions, East, West, and Central, and project and programmatic assumptions further detailed in the aforementioned scenario assumptions memo. Next slide. So let's first start with the 2 half-cent scenarios. This is an assumption of the continuation of the dedicated half-cent sales tax for another 20 years. Next slide. We'll first start with the new capacity half-cent scenario. Again, new capacity scenarios are aiming to maintain the region's mobility through the addition of new capacity, including strategic investments specifically in roadway and freeways, as well as rail-based transit. As you can see here, our half-cent scenarios provide approximately $28 billion to the region. And in this scenario, key features include an extensive expansion, freeway expansion investment, 1 bus rapid transit route, 3 light rail extensions, and 1 streetcar extension. Because of these several larger capital investments, this scenario includes the smallest investment in program areas like technology or safety. Next slide. The system optimization half-cent scenario prioritizes investments in infrastructure and technology and other programs that improve or maintain the region's mobility without new significant investment in capacity. Key features of this particular scenario include 4 new bus rapid transit routes, 2 light rail extensions, significant investment in program areas like technology and active transportation or bicycle and pedestrian improvements. And of the 4 scenarios, represents ultimately the smallest in new freeway expansion. Next slide. If you've had a chance to review the scenario planning report, you see we take moments to compare each scenario against each other and illustrate the outcomes associated with each. You'll see here one of those comparative slides. In this case, we're comparing the 2 half-cent scenarios. I want to just take a moment to orient you to this graphic. That top gray band represents today's activities, our level of service across the region, delay experienced on average. The bottom of this graphic in blue, you will see the no build scenario if we do not extend or expand the sales tax and the implications in the year 2050 accordingly. One of the key messages I certainly want to deliver today is that this is a fast growing region. No matter the amount of the investment we deliver, we will not be able to maintain the congestion levels we see today. We will continue to feel those pressures day or year after year, and we'll continue to experience increases in delay, reduction in level of service, and increases in congestion. Our job as part of this technical process is to identify the projects and solutions that can best mitigate against that additional pressure. And you'll see here in both half-cent scenarios, we are able to make progress against the no build scenario. Next slide. Moving on to the 1 cent scenarios. Again, we're able to invest in important infrastructure as part of those 2 half-cent scenarios, but we also recognize that there are additional needs expressed by our member agencies, and certainly looking over the horizon to 2050, know that we will continue need to invest in our transportation system. We wanted to demonstrate to our policymakers how the additional $15 billion in sales tax, if increasing to 1 cent, what else could be delivered as part of an investment portfolio. Next slide. Again, I'll orient you this to the new capacity 1 cent scenario, where we're focused more in fixed assets, including freeways, interchanges, grade separations, as well as rail investment. This scenario, the 1 cent scenarios include a $43 billion portfolio. The new capacity 1 cent includes the largest expansion in new miles of freeway of any of the 4 scenarios. It represents also the largest investment in our arterial street and grid network. It includes 4 proposed bus rapid transit lines, 3 light rail extensions, and 1 streetcar extension. This scenario also includes a significant investment to expand and improve regional bus service, which is really only possible if we increase the tax rate over a half cent. This is also the only scenario that includes partial funding for the potential implementation of commuter rail, covering approximately 50% of the potential capital cost associated. Next slide. Finally, I'll introduce you to the system optimization 1 cent scenario, where we're increasing our investment into solutions that maximize our existing facilities. These investments include additional programmatic investment in intelligent transportation systems and emerging technologies, widening our existing freeways and improving arterial intersections, and delivering a diverse transit portfolio. Specifically, of any scenario, this includes the largest investment in transit, including a robust bus rapid transit program with 6 proposed lines, 3 light rail extensions, and the largest investment to expand and improve regional bus service. This package also adds important widenings to our freeway system and includes the largest investment in programs like active transportation, emerging technology, and transportation demand management. Next slide. I'll orient you again to this slide, comparing both of the 1 cent scenarios to today and then into the future. And you'll see, again, we're making some additional progress with this increase in investment in our region. Next slide. This has been a lot of information already. We have found these thumbnail maps of discrete capital improvements helpful in illustrating the picture associated with each of these 4 scenarios. Just wanted to briefly touch on this slide to illustrate the composition of projects included in each of these 4 scenarios, and how they differ across the 2 funding rates. Next slide. At this time, we are also seeking public feedback. We have been hosting virtual meetings, live chatting with residents, answering their questions and taking their comments, taking any opportunity to present to a civic group or organization at their request. I will report that we are pleased with our response, and you should be very pleased with your constituents who are coming to these events asking very sophisticated questions about our transportation future. They recognize and understand that we have some tough trade-offs ahead and are providing fantastic feedback into this process. We'll be able to provide some initial reflections at the end of the month, but we'll be detailing all the feedback that we hear via our website, these virtual events, and otherwise in a report that we will distribute in June. Next slide. So looking ahead and focused here in this spring, this is a crescendo of our process, having delivered 4 technically sound and viable alternatives to start our conversation from. We will work with you over the course of the upcoming weeks in hopes that our region can come to consensus this summer with the discrete high capacity projects, as well as programmatic investments for our future, ultimately leading into our federal air quality conformity process this fall, where we will document the full plan and then ultimately deliver it for regional council consideration at the end of the year. Next slide. So more acutely, what does this month look like and the weeks ahead? We wanted to use this opportunity to introduce you to each of the scenarios and definitely get and discuss and get your reflections from these key trade-offs and policies embedded in each. We need to start at one point, use one scenario as a starting point, and MAG's recommendation is that we start at the system optimization half-cent scenario. As we've met over the last weeks with you and your member agencies, we've asked you to provide us your feedback, identify your priorities, especially those in the Arterial program, give us your reflections. We'll be using that and direction from you to develop a draft preferred scenario in the upcoming weeks. We would like to get that direction this month so we can begin that work to pull together and demonstrate what we can and cannot deliver starting in June. We do have a management committee work group at the end of this month. We'll be providing some of the initial public feedback and reflections that we've received, but also sharing the last technical element of this process, which is the guiding principles for our bus funding, bus operations funding for regional future. And then again, moving into the month of June to really focus on the decision-making process where we ultimately build and get direction on a preferred scenario and its components. Madam Chair, this completes my presentation. I'll be joined by John Bolin today. We are happy to take your reflections, your observations, but also answer any questions that you might have.
Wonderful, Audra. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to MAG staff and all of our member agencies for the hard work to get us here. It is fun to see what is possible and to think about the future of our great region. I will open it up to members of the committee for comments, reflections.
This is Mayor Wires. I have a question.
Mayor Wires.
Thank you. And my staff had a discussion, I guess, earlier with Audrey and John. My question is, does Reconstruction qualify under the definition of arterial rehabilitation?
Madam Chairwoman, Mayor Wires, while we don't have those discrete project or programmatic definitions yet, that would be our envisionment for an arterial rehabilitation program. If the direction is to invest in a set aside for that amount of funding, we would envision reconstruction projects in our arterial grid system to qualify.
All right, then through the chair, if I may, would it be possible if we could make it clear in writing? In essence, can we change the definition to read arterial rehabilitation, a new program featuring projects that involve reconfiguring or otherwise altering existing arterial streets to improve their efficiency, safety, comfort, or address other operational considerations.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Commissioner Daniels.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Question for Audra and John, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but when we are looking at the implementation of new freeways and new freeway scenarios, how does the ongoing maintenance of that fit into the conversation as it relates to ADOT? Is there sort of a let's say, companion type increase in their budgets in order to accommodate such things? And then coupling that with some of the robust discussions we've had lately about rubberized asphalt, as well as the piloted technique. Can you touch on those two things and how those fit in, how both of those scenarios fit into this conversation?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the TPC, I'll take the first stab and then perhaps turn it over to Audra to fill in any additional detail. The direction that we've seen that we've received thus far from this committee is that the responsibility to maintain our freeways belongs to the state and the state legislature. As such, we have not assumed that in any of our scenarios, though we have deliberately included as part of the scenario planning effort what that added burden is, recognizing that if we're adding infrastructure, there's a cost to maintain that. With respect to the question of rubberized asphalt or the different surface treatments, that actually represents a capital improvement. And what you do see in the scenarios is that funding has been set aside to facilitate future capital rehabilitation of our pavement. Of course, recognizing that we're still going through the policy process to determine what that might be.
Thank you. That was helpful. Appreciate it. I know that if we know whenever we get this to the legislature, they are going to be asking about the ongoing maintenance costs, and I do appreciate that we're taking that into consideration as we look at these different scenarios. So thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Mayor Daniels. This is Mayor Barney. I'd like to add on or build on both of those. In looking at these programs, I can't see how we can include some of both of them. And I have a hard time envisioning a half-cent sales tax being enough to accomplish all of the needs and the desires of our region. Transportation is one of the few items the residents of Queen Creek have voted to increase taxes to support. And I cannot fathom the whole region not being as like-minded as my residents are, that they're willing to tax themselves to improve the transportation issues. And so I'd like to see us go for more than a half cent and have some kind of a combination of both, because we do need the widening, we do need the maintenance, we do need all of these things. It's just a matter of prioritizing and getting the best bang for our buck. So I appreciate staff and all they've done. They've worked so hard at this and gone through so many scenarios and probably spent more sleepless nights than I have worrying about these kind of things. But I do thank you for your time and efforts, and all of the mayors and those on the committee here that are talking about this, getting out and talking to your residents, your constituents, and finding out what they need and coming back is such a great thing that's been done. And I do appreciate all the work. So thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Sellers.
Thank you. Audra, I think maybe you or Eric, if you wouldn't mind, could give a quick update. We had a meeting yesterday where I had you talk about this. Perhaps you could give a quick update on the potential impact of a federal infrastructure plan.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman Sellers, Chairwoman Gallego, members of Transportation Policy Committee. We have received, especially in our one-on-ones, also the opportunity yesterday to meet with transportation stakeholders organized by the AGC, questions about the potential future infusion of transportation dollars, new transportation dollars coming out of Washington, D.C. Perhaps us at MAG, we're maybe a little stagnant on this. We've been promised over 15 years worth of administrations delivering big and expansive transportation infrastructure bills, but have been still waiting for those to come to fruition. The realities from our perspective is there's certainly interest in a national infrastructure plan, perhaps more infusion into transportation projects at a federal level that could come down to this region. One of our strategies in our funding assumptions is to be ready and able to take advantage of those opportunities if they transpire. Also recognizing we have transportation reauthorization, which may change how the feds want the formula funds to be used. We want to be ready and have a resilient portfolio. We can take advantage of those opportunities. And that's one of the reasons our funding assumptions are included as such, but we still wait to see if there are any additional directions or infusion of new funding into transportation for which this region could certainly use. I don't know, Nathan or Eric, if there's anything you would like to add to that.
No, I think Audra's point, Madam Chair, members of the TPC, is that for the last 3 administrations, there has been discussion about large infrastructure bills to stimulate the economy and also reauthorization. Nothing has happened. So we continue to monitor the situation in Washington and hopeful that something will happen on the infrastructure side this year. My guess is probably going to be something less than the 2.1 trillion that was originally talked about. But it could still be a significant amount of funding, and given our needs in the region, additional federal funds certainly would be welcome.
Well, and certainly the key for me is that we have a plan ready to take those funds if they become available.
Thank you, Chairman. Additional comments from the committee.
Madam Chair.
Mayor Osborne.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak again. Buckeye is requesting again that State Route 30 from Route 303 to State Route 85 be included in all 4 scenarios. We sent a letter this week reflecting the reasons why, and the basics of those are: it is what was voted on by the voters years ago. It's what the MAG Regional Council had said recently in a vote. This was May 22nd, 2019, where Regional Council said that the State Route 30 should be included, prioritized in the scenarios moving forward, because it was not built in the original Prop 400. And the other 2 are pretty easy. Congestion is getting worse, and future costs are going to go up. That section of State Route 30 between 303 and 85 is predominantly farmland. We have in that area between I-10 and downtown Buckeye, or State Route 30 corridor, State Route 85 and Perryville, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 homes that are in some phase of development over the next 5 years. And that's increasing. We are going to do 4,000 single-family building permits this year in Buckeye. In that corridor, it's also one of our key employment corridors, and we have right now north of 25 million square foot of industrial projects that have shortlisted Buckeye, which is approximately 20,000 jobs coming to the area. And I don't expect that all of those are going to hit, but if half of those hit, that's a significant amount of traffic that is added to the area. Currently, the only out is I-10, and it does not work. And even with the addition of a lane in each direction, I-10 does not work for that amount of traffic. That does not even include the master plan communities that are developing to the west of our downtown area, west of 85, that are going to add traffic to I-10. I-10 is our front door and gateway for commerce into the entire Metro Phoenix area. And if we bind that up with the lack of a reliever, an I-10 reliever, which is what State Route 30 is, we're going to continue to see not only I think as Audra had said, the congestion that we see there now, but it is going to be multiplied with the growth and then the increase in commerce that we're going to see in the Metro Phoenix area moving forward. With those homes and industrial projects and employment that's coming in, all of that is contemplated in our general plan, which bases the transportation side of it on the framework that MAG, our regional council funding authority, has said is going to happen. We're expecting that Prop 400 over the last 20 years would have included something to build State Route 30. And at this point, many of the scenarios that are being discussed do not include State Route 30 funding. It's going to be 40 years of, eventually, if it's not included in this expansion, that's 40 years worth of time that has gone by where growth is happening, and we're working our way toward an absolute choke point in getting goods and services to and from the city of Phoenix, getting people to and from jobs or their homes in the Buckeye area. And at some point that is going to stunt growth in the city of Buckeye and the region as a whole. And I think everybody understands, and I think MAG would agree with this, that there's a significant percentage of growth in the valley that is moving west because that is where the land is, or that is where the ability to grow moving forward is. And if we don't take care of that with improvements on I-10 and very specifically State Route 30, the I-10 reliever, we're going to have big issues moving forward. So I can't say that more times with folks that we meet with, whether it's the development community or the commercial community or residents moving in who say, why do we continue to build homes if the region can't keep up on regional infrastructure out in this area? So that's the perspective from Buckeye, and the time for State Route 30 is right now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor.
Madam Chair, it's Ken Weiss.
Well, I think Mayor Lord had her hand up first, and then I'll go to Mayor Weiss.
Thank you very much. I want to start off, first of all, by thanking MAG staff for accomplishing this tremendous lift. I have long supported the concept of a full cent if needed and adequately fund our region's infrastructure. But I must, at this point, give kudos to the MAG staff. Thank you very much. It should be no surprise to anyone on this committee that I support State Route 30, and I'm an avid believer in the economic prosperity the congestion relief will provide to this region. It has certainly been a long road to get where we are today, full of compromise, hope, and mutual respect. I deeply understand my colleague, Mayor Orgeburn, and I would ask everyone here today, put yourself in his shoes. How can we work together to ensure our voters know the entirety of SR 30 is still on the radars? I have one last curiosity. All four scenarios were created for 20-year life of the tax. What would 25 years get us? Is there an option here to identify additional funding to secure the right-of-way or develop the interim facility from 303 to 85? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Weiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So both of my colleagues have said it better than I can, but let me just reiterate that not building the SR 30 from Buckeye to Goodyear makes about as much sense as using a hose to fill up your pool and stepping on one portion of the hose to cut off the water. You accomplish nothing. Trade coming from Mexico, Yuma, San Diego will flow through that Buckeye corridor. It will flow through the western end of SR 30. That benefits Goodyear, Avondale, Phoenix, Chandler, and all points east. When I look at the plan and I look at the investments that were put toward maintenance and operations, which is about $1.5 billion, and I look at the cost of the extension from SR 30 from Goodyear to Buckeye, which is close to $1.1, $1.2 billion, the money is there. We just have to reallocate it. For members who weren't part of the May 12th Managers Committee meeting, there was a lot of discussion, and I encourage members of the TPC to go to the MAG website and watch that video. There was a lot of discussion by the technical people and staff that we entrust to give us information. And they were divided on maintenance and operations being put into Prop 500. They were divided on whether it's a half cent, 3/4, or 1 cent, and what we move forward with. And MAG is asking this body to make a recommendation for the full MAG Regional Council by the end of June. I don't know how we get there without all of these options being put on the table and MAG policymakers having the ability to vote on them. I will tell you that at this point, I am unwilling to bring a discussion up to my council regarding SR 30 without Buckeye's input and Buckeye's concerns being part of that discussion. So, Madam Chair, I don't know if anybody else would like to speak, but I appreciate the work that Mayor Osborne and Mayor Lord have done on this subject.
Mayor Gagwa.
Mayor Harkey.
I do want to thank Audra for the presentation today. And I know we've met with our staff and had a council retreat on this. And I know, again, we could easily go up to a 3-4 cent in order to meet all of the needs that are represented across our community. And I know we're going to come to a place of voting, but I do want to thank Audra, Meg, and bringing us to here. I know we've still got a lot of trade-offs that are important to the entire valley here, and I believe we're going to get there. But I do want to thank MAG and staff, and I imagine other mayors and councils are also meeting and weighing in on this as well. And we got a heavy lift in front of us, but I do want to thank you, MAG.
Thank you. Additional comments from members of the committee? From my perspective, it's important to remember that Prop 400 sales tax and federal funds paid for the original light rail capital, which include system construction, vehicles, infrastructure, and equipment. Transit asset management funds are simply the capital cost of rehabilitating or replacing aging assets at the end of their planned useful life. It's the same logic we use when we talk about replacing regional buses. Funding capital repair and replacement for light rail transit is analogous to replacing buses, repairing the rubberized asphalt on the freeways, or the capital rehab of arterial roadways. All of these are in the current scenarios. The MAG scenario assumptions memo explains capital costs to maintain the existing regional high capacity system are assumed at 100%. The focus is capital refurbishment and replacement of vehicles at facilities at the end of life, not regular annual maintenance. Additional comments from members of the committee? And we do need to talk about how we go from here. We have a busy set of events to be able to get to the plan on the timeline so that we can do that important analysis over the summer. So MAG staff has proposed as a starting point the half-cent system optimization, and then have each jurisdiction move forward from there. We could send in to MAG each of our jurisdictional priorities based that are not in that half-cent system optimization and highlight those of highest priority. And then MAG could bring back a revised scenario to the TPC at our next meeting that reflects the feedback from member agencies and the amount of funding needed to deliver the revised scenario. And we could reflect on that revised scenario as a way to move forward. That would give us a chance to have the conversation about what is the appropriate rate. So do we want to scale back to fit within the half-cent, or should we move to increase to a higher level of funding? And then we could have a working document that this group could use to move forward to the final plan.
Chairwoman Gallego, it's correct. That's the direction we're looking for, and certainly something we can deliver for June.
And I think it's also worth getting feedback from this committee about whether we might want to meet additionally to have more robust feedback and conversation. So perhaps bi-weekly until we complete the plan.
Madam Chair, this is Mayor Giles.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I just want to express support for staff suggestions that we maybe focus on the, or for purposes of discussion, we look at the half-cent system optimization plan and use that as maybe the whipping boy, you know, to see what we like and don't like. I hate to be pessimistic, but I have always, you know, just I think we need a dose of reality here. What's the likelihood that our conservative Republican legislature and supervisors and governor are going to do something that's perceived as raising taxes? So I agree with the, I'm sure what's the consensus of this body, which is that we would absolutely benefit from a cent or more. I just I hate to see us. I'd like to do some polling. You know, I'd like not of the voters. I think the voters will pass this, but of the decision makers that we're going to have to persuade to see that happen. The polling that I've done suggests that that there is support for a half cent, but not more. So I think in the real world, that's what we have to start talking about. So, but I also would endorse the idea that we start meeting more regularly. I think we're getting down to crunch time. We are at the point where it's now time for us, the policymakers, to take this over from staff or to be more directly involved, to actually craft the plan to make these difficult decisions. And once a month is probably not enough to do that now that we're that we're in the final stretch of this project. So I support both of those suggestions.
Thank you, Mayor. Chairman Sellers.
Yeah, and Mayor Giles' comments caused me to feel like I need to make my remarks again that I make all the time, and that is, I want the legislature to give our county the right to allow the voters to decide what the spending level should be, what the sales tax rate should be. They need to give us the same authority they've given every other county in the state. I recognize that with what's going on today, that may be a difficult thing to accomplish, but nevertheless, I feel very passionate about that.
Madam Chair.
Chair Weiss.
Thank you, ma'am. I've always respected my colleague from Mesa, and that will never change. But I would also say that if at any time that this body was going to go to the legislature and ask for them to support what we're trying to do, it's now, especially with the 1 cent, with the narrow margins of conservative votes in the House and the Senate. I think that it is as likely as we'll get for a while that a 1 cent tax would be passed. I agree with Chairman Sellers also that I think the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors views its responsibilities as doing what the public would like. And the public would like to vote on this issue, whether it's half cent, 3/4, or 1 cent. I think that's the way we need to go. And I'm okay with a 3/4 or a 1 cent. I'm not in favor of a half cent because I don't think it gets us where we want to go. And 10 or 15 years from now, we'll be kicking ourselves saying we should have done more. So I would like to see us move forward with different scenarios. I'm okay meeting more often. I'm okay starting with a half cent, but I really think we need to look at 3/4 or 1 cent to get these plans moving.
Madam Chair, Jerry Wires.
Thank you, Mayor Wires.
Yeah, I do like the idea of trying to meet more often. I think that's a great idea. Although I would really encourage and hope that maybe we can start meeting in person. There's no doubt in my mind that there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen. And I think we need to be looking in each other's eyes, not at television screens. This is way too important. A lot of people have a lot of things they'd like to say, and I don't think it happens on Zoom meetings.
Thank you, Mayor Wires. Mayor Lord. Thank you.
Am I on?
Now we can hear you.
All right, thank you. I asked a question when I talked before about that 20-year life tax. What would 25 look at it? And so it would be interesting for us to see those figures, that might be a compromise between the half cent and the full cent.
Chairwoman Gallego, Mayor Lord, we can certainly illustrate what a 25-year term of a sales tax can determine or distribute in terms of funding. Those are easy, scalable projections that we can deliver as these conversations progress.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mayor Woods.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick things. I mean, I would love, and I respect all the conversation that's taken place today. My perspective is I would love to find a way to do more, but I kind of agree with what Mayor Giles is saying from this perspective. I'm in a city where school bonds, city bonds, overrides pass with huge margins. I mean, that's just the nature of the community we live in here in the city of Tempe. So I have no doubt if this was actually to our voters would very heavily support something like this, because I think they would see the need to do this once and not have to do it, 10, 15, 20 years down the line to come back and get the thing that we missed the first time. At the end of the day, though, I've also seen where a lot of other surrounding cities, many times these city bonds and school bonds and things of that nature don't have the same levels of passage, or they're failing by narrow margins. And so I think the concern is, I would love to get more and really take care of the entire valley in this process. I see a reason for all of us to have our transportation needs met, but I do want to make sure that whatever we put forward, we do have the ability to get it passed. So I share Mayor Giles's caution and making sure that whatever we put forward, we really do believe that all of our respective communities and all of our constituents would come back and actually support. And if we feel like that's the case, I would be more than happy to support that. And then I guess secondly, to echo Mayor Wyer's comments, I mean, I would love to, if members of this committee feel comfortable, I would love to begin meeting in person and meeting more frequently. I think that at this point, it would be probably good to see each other in person if we do feel that that's the safe thing to do at this point, but I'm happy to. But whether we meet in person or meet virtually, I am totally endorsing the idea of having more meetings, since really it is kind of coming down to the wire. And frankly, we probably need to take this on more as policymakers.
Thank you, Mayor Woods. We'll go to Mayor Peterson and then Commissioner Daniels.
Thank you, Chair Gallego. I lean towards the comments that were made by Mayor Giles and Mayor Woods about the half cent and our legislature and what we think the appetite will be as we're moving forward with this. I myself in Gilbert, we don't have a difficult time, like Mayor Woods alluded to, passing bonds, but I will be coming out with a bond this fall in November that is going to be quite substantial. I think it'll be difficult for me to go back to my residents and say, now we also want you to vote on this bond for transportation. They might be thinking, what is this mayor doing to us under these circumstances? I think that the legislature, although close in numbers, are working very hard right now, today, tomorrow, to cut as many taxes as they can and to make themselves as lean as possible. So I'm not sure that it's the best time to be asking for something higher. I want to see the options for the half cent. I'm happy to look at the options for quarter cent, 3/4 cent and full, but I think that we really have to look at it from a realistic position. And I do agree with Mayor Giles on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Daniels.
Thank you, Chair Gallego. Appreciate it. And as always, appreciate the good dialogue, and would also encourage us to have future meetings in person, and obviously a virtual option for those who may either be uncomfortable or for whatever reason unable to participate in person. But I do see this as probably the most critical thing we will do as a group, at least for a substantial amount of time. So I definitely support that. I did want to plant one other seed, and that is that as we continue to grow as a region, we are obviously finding that we are spilling into neighboring counties and or planning areas. And so I would just like to plant a seed that we have perhaps a more formal conversation with neighboring planning agencies on how we can create the best types of connections. I know that staff to staff, there is lots of dialogue at that level, but perhaps as a transportation policy committee, we look at those a little bit more closely, recognizing that so many of those who are traveling on our roadways are doing so now between planning areas. And I do think unsiloing some of that conversation could be very helpful for us both now and in the future. So a little slightly off topic, but really important as we're talking about a 20-year time frame.
Thank you. We'll go to Mayor Peterson, followed by Councilwoman Binsbacher.
I already spoke. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
We'll go to Binsbacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a lot of comments have been made, and I appreciate all of the comments coming from all of the different perspectives. One of the things that I really want to emphasize is what I believe Mayor Lord had mentioned, and that is there's going to have to be compromise and mutual respect amongst this group. And these relationships are all very important, important to me, important to Peoria. And so that mutual respect is going to be critical as we do move forward and make some very difficult decisions. In thinking about the constituents that I represent, the citywide throughout Peoria, I'm not at a place where I can, support the 1 cent sales tax without additional information. I need to be able to make a case with confidence that I know exactly where these additional dollars are going, where all the dollars are going to justify the increase, and assurances that of how this money is going to be spent above just the topics that we're talking about, but the big picture. So, and I absolutely would like to see additional analysis done on 25 years versus 20 years. I think that's a critical step that I haven't seen any information on, and I really support the request for that information to look at that option. And as far as meeting in person, or additional meetings, I definitely support meeting in person if everyone is prepared to do that. I think it's much more effective. I do think we need to sit around the table and look each other in the eye and have straightforward, respectful dialogue about all of this. And that's much more effective in person. But I still have the question about, what's being done with this input? I still don't have a clear understanding of how the decisions are being made as to the elements within this plan. An example of that would be there's no mention of connectors that support the bus system and impact the region. That's not in here anywhere, but yet the streetcar is. And again, I'm not familiar exactly with how much territory that covers, but that seems more focused on one specific area versus a regional impact. And that's just one example of questions that I want to be able to answer and topics I want to be able to speak to. And would like some understanding, if not today, in future meetings before this is finalized, how we have arrived at those specific decisions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mayor Harkey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add my voice that I do think as we continue this progress forward, that meeting together live is significant and important. I think that we've all been behind our screens long enough, and there is just value in haggling this out. And I also would support whatever increase we need in terms of time, if additional meetings to get this done. Because again, we all realize that our window is narrowing, and if this is going to happen the way that we all believe it should and will, then it is essential that we do whatever we need to do. Quick comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to Eric Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman Gallego and members of the TPC. Very good discussion here. Really appreciate all the participation of the mayors. We are getting down to decision points, and it's clear that we have a lot of work to do moving forward here over the next couple months. We can handle additional meetings. I just contacted my IT staff, and we're making some meeting room changes as we speak. I was briefed on it this morning, and I think we can have an in-person meeting. It's kind of tricky with the hybrid technology because we have to continue to have the Zoom connections too. So just from a logistical perspective, we're working on it, and hopefully we'll have the ability to have an in-person meeting. I do think that's really important. In terms of these different scenarios, we can certainly look at a 25-year scenario. But I think the other thing that I would recommend, one of the things that we think we can do internally from a staff level, is start constructing a scenario that includes the top priorities of our member agencies. And once again, Mayor Gallego, I think you mentioned that it would be good to have each of our member agencies submit their top priorities to us, and so we can make sure that we understand what those priorities are. But if we build a scenario that it's likely to be above a half cent, but likely not to be a full cent, I don't know where that might end up. But what I'm saying is, I think if we construct a scenario that includes the most of the top priorities, I can't say it would include all of them, then we can look at what the implied tax rate might be. And so it might place us there at a 0.7 cents, for example, as opposed to 0.75. And so once again, I think we can go through the technical part of that analysis and have some results fairly soon to TPC. I would encourage additional meetings. There's a lot of material to cover, a lot of questions out there still, certainly understand that. So that's just my input. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see Councilwoman Bitzbacher and Mayor Harkey with hands up, but I am not going to go back to you unless you tell me you would like to. Great. So it sounds like general consensus that we are willing to do additional meetings and a preference for in-person. I cannot completely say we have complete consensus around the funding levels. So I will leave it to Mag to ascertain exactly where we are on funding levels. It does seem like we are interested in a 25-year model as well.
Chairwoman Gallego, I think we have some good direction here. I do think we'll start with the half-cent system optimization. We'll be looking for feedback from member agencies this month. Please let us know if there are specific priorities missing in that system optimization scenario. And as Eric indicated, we'll begin preparing a revised scenario and talk to its implications, both in terms of a tax rate, but also considering the potential of a different term, 20 years versus 25 years.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. It's neat to see the plan move forward, and we're going to make very important investments with this. So we appreciate it. Thank you all for the very important discussion on this particular item, and we'll look forward to seeing you and coming up with a plan that really meets our entire region's needs and balances many competing demands. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion only, so we will move forward to item number 5, which is electric vehicle infrastructure overview. Kathy Knoop, Energy Innovation Advisor, Electric Transportation at Arizona Public Service, will present on the current status of the electric vehicle market and infrastructure in the region with a focus on the transportation infrastructure. Kathy, the floor is yours. And Kathy, you are muted.
Well, that was a really good speech I just gave.
It was brilliant.
It was brilliant. I know you guys have had a pretty intense discussion. I hope I can lighten it up a little bit. But thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Transportation Committee, for having me here today. It's an honor to talk about electric transportation and electric vehicles. I've been actually working in this particular field for the last 8 years. 7 of those years were with Salt River Project. I came to APS last year to work on their electric transportation program. And just like I've seen Maricopa County grow my life, I was born here in Maricopa County, and the roads grow and the transportation system grow, seeing this change in electric transportation, which is pretty meaningful to us as an electric utility industry. But I think it's going to be pretty meaningful to Maricopa County too. Not only for, some of the economic development potential, but for the air quality potential. If you could move to the next slide. I want to talk about a few of the key reasons why we need to be concerned, or not maybe concerned, but hopeful about this increase in electric transportation. And first, talking about just economic development. I know I've been working a lot with the Arizona Commerce Authority, the Mobility Innovation Zone they're putting together, GPEC, who want to bring a lot of businesses together. And there are a lot of startup businesses that are involved, not just in building electrified transportation, but in providing the parts and the equipment as well to supply these electric vehicles. There are companies from across Europe and China coming to build plants in the United States because electric transportation has taken off. Just about doubled in Europe over the last year. They are seeing the growth opportunities coming to America, so they are also building plants in America. We are fighting to get some of those groups here. As you can see from my slide, we have Nikola, we have Lucid, Electromechanica just broke ground the other day. You can find their little vehicle pods down at Fashion Square if you want to drive them. But there's other companies also that we're thinking of bringing here. But one of the deals, obviously, with economic development in Maricopa County is air quality. Maricopa County, we all know we have an air quality issue. And there is a reduction of ozone from greater electric transportation here. And I've been involved with some brilliant people at MAG who've done air quality studies looking at how transportation leads to increased air quality issues and how transportation can be used to decrease air quality issues. And electric transportation is a component of that. Obviously the biggest thing is to get the older vehicles off the road. That's the number one thing that's going to help with our air quality, reducing NOx emissions, which in turn reduce ozone emissions. But replacing those with zero emitting electric vehicles is going to be also a really big, important component of increasing that reduction in ozone from transportation. But when we look also at the fuel, you've seen what happened recently in Texas with the natural gas. You've seen what happened with the fuel in the Southeast with the hacker and waiting in lines for gasoline. And even the price of gasoline has gone up quite a bit. When we're fueling vehicles with electricity, it's generated here locally. It's generated by employees, people who live and work in Arizona, producing reliable electricity for our homes and businesses, but now for our transportation fuel. This is the gas station of the future. Electric vehicles charge at home 90% of the time in garages. Of course, there's a challenge there too, because not everybody has a garage. So it's something we need to look to. But truly the battery cost for the lithium ion batteries that go in electric vehicles, the cost is going down dramatically. And Bloomberg New Energy Finance will have their EV Outlook 2021 out here this time in May. They do a prediction of when the cost for high voltage electric batteries for electric vehicles bring the cost of a vehicle down so it's the same as an internal combustion engine. And that's predicted to be 2024, 2025. This year, it may have moved up sooner. Not sure how COVID affected it. But if there's one way to look at that, in about 7 hours, Ford Motor Company is going to reveal their F-150 Lightning battery electric truck. It is going to look very much like an F-150. And they haven't announced the cost yet, but they've said it's $5,000 to $7,000 more than its comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. In a few years, there won't be any difference. So when people are contemplating, well, I can get an electric Ford F-150 or a gas Ford F-150, the electric has better torque, better towing capacity, it's quieter, it's faster. People are going to start, just as they are today, making that decision to drive electric. Medium and heavy duty trucks are another component of transportation electrification that is really growing. Some of you may have heard that the city of Flagstaff, who has a sustainability commitment, is looking at electrifying their metropolitan bus fleet. I believe they have 29 or 27 buses. So it's nowhere near Valley Metro in size, but they are over the next several years going to be converting those to electric buses. Fortunately for them, they have great weather up there, so they're not going to be as impacted by the heat. But the technology is improving as such that soon we'll also have that opportunity in Maricopa County to look at electric buses, and the air conditioning load on reducing the duty cycle won't be as impactful. But we can also think about street sweepers, about electric garbage trucks, electric delivery vans. Amazon is electrifying their entire fleet of delivery vans. And I know in Maricopa County, we've got like 5 or 6 hubs for those delivery vans here in Maricopa County. We also have, like the reason Amazon is doing it, corporate sustainability goals. Many of you cities also have sustainability goals. And when you have looked at buying renewable energy, adding solar power, using your municipal buildings and improving the lighting and the insulation, and you've gotten all of those measures that you can put in, the next thing to look at is transportation. Transportation for your own municipal fleets, transportation for county fleets, and transportation in other ways where you can help your businesses living in your counties and your cities electrify as well. But I think the biggest thing is it is coming. It is a juggernaut. Today, there's 40,000 electric vehicles in the state of Arizona, about 42,000. We recently finished some work with the statewide electrification plan. And if things go as predicted, we could see 1 million electric vehicles in Arizona by that time. And when I look at Maricopa County, we have 60% of the population in Maricopa County. So a large portion of that is going to be within Maricopa County. I don't know, Mayor Gallego, do we have more than 60% in Maricopa County? I'm not sure.
We are America's fastest growing county.
Wow, it's big. 4 million people or something like that. That's crazy from when I was a kid. But these are some of the really compelling reasons why I think that we need to pay attention to this increase in transportation electrification today. But you look, example for cities, how are cities going to fund? What do we need to fund? Do we need to fund electric buses and electric garbage trucks? How do we pay for that infrastructure? What is our actual savings going to be from reduced maintenance and gasoline? What are the greenhouse gas emission reductions we can take credit for? What are those NOx emission reductions that's going to limit the ozone formation, and how fast will that happen? So there's a lot of questions still to be answered, but one of those things is, how do we pay for some of these activities and actions that we want to do? So I put down here a few things. As you know, President Biden is really looking to add electric vehicle charging infrastructure across the United States. There's a lot of DOE grants out there right now. And there's a lot of momentum towards cleaning up transportation and electrifying transportation in many ways. I know there was the Volkswagen money. Our governor has used that money to replace older school buses with less polluting, cleaner diesel buses. I believe there's $5 million of that funding left. And I don't know if he would make any available to the cities for electrification, but some of that money can be used for electrification. I know you guys are involved with Clean Cities. They provide grants. As a utility, as APS, and I know as SRP as well, we provide rebates. And for APS, we provide charging stations For several of the cities, probably on this call today, we've put some charging stations in through our Take Charge Arizona program. It is a small program, but I encourage you, if you haven't put any charging stations, either for your employees or your city fleets or your county fleets, please go to APS EV and join the program and get some charging stations in there. National Drive Electric Week is really a fun week with the local electric automobile associations. Inviting them to do ride and drives in your cities is another great way to do it. And like I said, future federal programs that'll be coming down the pike. If you want to look at other mayors that and other cities that have really moved forward, really active EV programs, you could think of Houston, Austin Energy, and Seattle. Austin Energy, particularly, they are regulated by the city council there in Austin. And they have just done amazing things with education and outreach, because part of it is getting the word out to folks moving forward with that. So I hope you'll go to this website. I think I have a link in there for this chart that talks about some funding. When we did the state
slide forward.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask. I was looking at my own slides. My apologies. So yeah, this was the slide where I was talking about federal funding, and there's some links, and I'm sure they'll make this presentation available to you guys, because I have about 20 backup documents, because I know we're only going till 1 o'clock here. So I want to go fairly quickly. You can go to the next slide. We did a statewide transportation electrification plan over the summer and the fall, and it finished up with a presentation of the Corporation Commission in April. You can find that document within the docket, and I could also make it available to anybody who'd like it. We talked a lot about a lot of different things. We talked about equity in transportation electrification, medium and heavy duty trucks, and what the different entities across the state could do to advance electric transportation. So specifically for the cities, we looked at things like electrifying the city fleets, looking at building codes. I know a lot of municipalities are looking at revising building codes to call for maybe new homes to be built with a 240 outlet in the garage. Just pre-wire for an electric vehicle charging station in the garage. Parking lots, as new parking lots are built, should they be pre-wired for EV charging stations, or even include EV charging stations? Things like that that will really help ease the way for people to buy and charge electric vehicles in public. When you can add charging stations to city parks, to county parks, to other areas where the public congregates for more than a few hours at a time, is another great way to support and grow EV adoption. Streamlining permitting for charging station installation is another huge one. I know that sometimes even for the APS Take Charge Arizona program, it takes a while to get some of these stations put into place. Rebates, bus fleets, there are cities that are doing EV rebates, light pole deployment for people who don't have parking garages, other ways for people who don't have dedicated parking to be able to charge their electric vehicle. And then considering equity and planning. How do we make sure that people in underserved communities have access to charging? I know we talk about, oh gosh, you know, there's a Tesla and it's really expensive. Nobody's going to buy that who's in an underserved community. But used electric vehicles are a very good buy. They have very little maintenance requirements because an electric vehicle doesn't have the maintenance that's required of an internal combustion engine. So these are all great things that cities can do. You can go to the next slide. This is some of the work we also did in the statewide TE plan. There is a link at the bottom of that to the document. But one of the things it shows is as we predict and forecast what the EV adoption is going to be, which we need to do from a utility perspective, because we have to figure out where we're going to need to provide additional infrastructure for charging. We believe that, and the stakeholders in this plan all agree that we should be anticipating 1 million electric vehicles by 2030 across the state. This is the charging stations that would be required to support that many electric vehicles across the state. And we talk about residential, workplace, and level 2. And level 2 is just the charging with a 240 volt outlet and maybe a 40 amp circuit. DC fast charging is 480 volt 3-phase charging, and that's the very fast charging. And that's typically along highway corridors or near clusters of apartment buildings. So somebody can go charge up in 30 minutes or less. Would you go to the next slide? We all want to know where the EVs are located. Right now, like I said, there's 42,000 in Arizona. Maricopa County has most of those. They're a little over 31,000. And you can see Phoenix, being the largest population center, is leading that charge, followed by Scottsdale, Chandler, Gilbert, and Mesa. You know, one of the things that is offered if you have a fully electric vehicle, you can ride in the HOV lane, which is very convenient to a lot of people. And I'm sure when I listened to a little of the earlier conversation, we're talking about a 1/2 cent sales tax or 3/4 or a penny to improve the roads, which we really need to do. The question will probably come to your mind, well, what about the EVs who don't use any gasoline? And now they're not paying gas taxes, which also go to support our roadways. And that's a good question, and it's something to consider. I know that some communities, and I think Seattle or I think Washington is one of them, is looking at a mileage-based tax, road tax, instead of a fuel-based road tax. Go on to the next slide, which I think is my last one. Just where are the public charging stations today? We have quite a few, because in 2011, Phoenix and Tucson applied for the ERA money to be part of the EV project, which was an Obama era project that put charging stations in several cities across the US. Austin got charge point stations, Phoenix got blink stations. Phoenix to this day has a lot of blink stations, and I believe that they're adding some more. These are where they're concentrated. You can see from this map. This came from the Alt Fuels database, a lot of it along highway corridors. You can see how many stations and how many are in each location. The big ones that are getting built up are definitely the DC fast charging connectors. That helps people get from town to town across the US. So I went through those slides very fast. I do have a lot of backup slides that talk in basics about battery electric vehicles, EV charging, and some things like that. But I wanted to give you guys an overview of where EVs are today and where I think they're going. And if we have 5 minutes for questions, I would love to answer any questions anybody has.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathy, for important presentation and covering so much ground. Mayor Hartke of Chandler.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick statement. I know probably this past year and longer, we've started working with apartment complexes, new office, whatever, as part of the just as steps. We've had no pushback from asking them to add charger stations as part of their development. And so we found it a quick and easy way without having to change some public infrastructure, and just again, recognizing the need, we've had zero pushback, and they're adding several stations when we do new development. So just a thought for others in the same boat.
Thank you, Mayor Hartke. And would you be willing to share that language with cities that might be interested in doing something similar?
Of course.
Wonderful. And I think Glendale's been doing some cool things with their codes and electric vehicles and all over the valley as well. And Buckeye must be winning on per capita fast charging. It's a good investment. Any additional comments or questions? Wonderful. Well, congrats to all the cities that have had big EV announcements already this year. It's been exciting to see the ecosystem grow. And thank you, Kathy, for joining us and for that important presentation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Item 6 is a legislative update. MAG Policy and Government Relations Director Nathan Pryor will introduce this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the TPC. Next slide, please. Today, I want to cover just ongoing developments on 2 federal issues that we've been tracking. The first one is community project funding, also known as earmarks. Obviously, in the recent months, projects have been submitted to congressional offices, and they've been submitted up the line as well. Some numbers have come out last week. So this is the House Transportation Infrastructure portion I'm focusing on today. There's a lot more to it in terms of projects that have been submitted, but On the House T&I side, we're seeing over 2,300 projects have been submitted from around the country, totaling over $14 billion. You can see the mean, average, and median project requests there. Next slide, please. This table shows the projects that have been submitted from Arizona. So MAG staff has worked with member agencies and congressional offices to confirm TIP eligibility. This has been a significant amount of coordination for project applications. So when the numbers have come out, and there is a link at the bottom there if you want more information to all the projects that have been submitted, we're seeing approximately 175 million projects have been submitted from Arizona congressional offices. Of note in this table, you'll see that I-10 widening Loop 202 to State Route 387 has been listed twice. It was submitted by both Congressman Stanton and Congressman O'Halloran, $20 million each. That is not having a doubling effect, if you will. It's a redundancy in the table. So just noting that. Where this goes next, this will be impacted by the president's proposed budget, which is anticipated around May 27. So that will affect some of the funding pots and where these projects might go. Some more to come on that. Next slide, please. My last item is on proposed federal transportation infrastructure funding, as was mentioned during the earlier item, in particular by Supervisor Sellers. Of course, there's been conversation about historic levels of funding for infrastructure, the American Jobs Plan versus the GOP Senate 5-year plan. These proposals are being discussed. Again, the president's proposed budget later this month will have a role as to where this goes. But next slide, please. Some of the challenge in examining this and analyzing this, so far the American Jobs Plan from the administration as proposed has not had timelines associated with it. The Transportation Center in Washington, D.C. has done this analysis, which is really an assumption to get to apples comparison. So if the American Job Plan were to be in a 5-year window, which will unlikely, it will not be able to be longer than that, given some of the in particular rail developments, if they are pursued, to be longer than 5 years. But again, trying to get to an apples to apples comparative, this is what it would look like. So in the graphic, you can see on the gray line, that's the baseline spending for these areas of transportation. The Senate GOP proposal is the more orangish, reddish line, if you will. And then the White House's proposal is in the green line. So, hopefully this helps to manage some of the expectations about potential funding. Obviously, a lot more conversation is to come on this in the coming weeks and months. This could have some rollover effect into the overall surface transportation reauthorization as well. So we'll continue to monitor this. Back to the Supervisor Sellers' point about being ready for any funding that comes. Of course, we will be ready for that. This region, as pointed out, is significantly growing in its population, fastest growing region, fastest growing state, one of the fastest growing states. So we will be ready to bring down any funding that does come to the state and region. Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Any questions? We appreciate the update.
Thank you.
We next move to item number 7, request from the membership for an item on a future agenda. And on this one, I would like to ask MAG staff to put together some diverse voices from around our region on transportation, short presentation of less than 15 minutes or so that we hear from perspectives on the work we're doing on 400 extension as we continue our work. Item number 8 is comments or announcements from the membership. Business is now concluded. We are adjourned.